What if everything you owned, everything you hoped for, depended on a cabin that wasn't empty at all? Dalton Keane felt that truth hit him like a punch the moment he pushed open the old wooden door. He expected dust, silence, maybe an old chair left behind. Instead, a pair of green eyes stared back at him from across the room. A woman stood by the fireplace, her auburn hair catching the warm light, her hands still from whatever she had been doing a second earlier. For a moment, neither of them moved, both frozen in the shock of seeing the other. 30 seconds earlier, Dalton had still believed this cabin was his fresh start. The trail leading up into the pines had been quiet, the morning sun filtering through tall trees as he guided his wagon toward the small wooden structure. He had bought the place sight unseen with the last dollars he had left. The deed sat folded in his vest pocket. It was supposed to be his chance to rebuild after losing his ranch to creditors. He had pictured an empty cabin waiting for him, a place to start over. But smoke rose from the chimney. Fresh smoke. Someone was inside. His hands tightened on the reins as he drew closer. He had nothing left in this world except this land and whatever hope it carried. Someone stealing his property was something he couldn't afford. He climbed down from the wagon and squared his shoulders. He planned to be firm, not cruel, but he wasn't about to let anyone take from him again. He opened the door without knocking. Warmth from the fire touched his cold face. The cabin was clean. Too clean for a place that was supposed to be empty. Fresh bread sat on the table. Wildflowers rested in a jar. These small touches didn't match the picture of a squatter or drifter. This looked like a home. She turned slowly, her green eyes full of strength and a hint of fear. She wore a simple blue dress, old but kept neat. Her face was tired, yet full of dignity. "You must be the new owner," she said, her voice steady. "I've been expecting you." Dalton removed his hat out of pure instinct. Something about her presence demanded respect. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm Dalton Keane. I bought this cabin. I have the papers to prove it." She nodded, not surprised by his words. "I'm Cora Lane," she said, "but before you ask me to leave, you should know that I can't." Her calm certainty unsettled him. This wasn't the tone of someone who had been caught doing wrong. This was someone who knew far more than she was saying. Dalton set his hat on the table and pulled the deed from his vest. "I don't care what agreement you had with the previous owner," he said, trying to control the frustration burning in his chest. "I have the legal papers. This is my land now." Cora stepped away from the fire, her hands clasped together. "There are things about this place you don't know yet," she said softly. "Things that change everything. The only thing that matters is that I paid for this cabin with money I couldn't afford to lose." Dalton laid the deed between them. "Whatever story you're about to tell me, I've heard worse. I've lived worse." For a moment, something passed across her eyes, not fear, not anger, something like pity. "I'm sure you have," she said gently. "But this isn't about money or papers. This is about survival." Dalton studied her closely. She wasn't lying, at least she didn't look like it. Her clothes were clean, her hair braided neatly. The cabin was kept with care. She wasn't a drifter passing through. She had been here a while, too long to be hiding accidentally. "Whose survival?" he asked. Before she could answer, the sound of hoofbeats cut through the air. Fast, purposeful, more than one horse. Cora went pale and moved to the window, staying behind the curtain. "How many people knew you were coming here today?" she whispered urgently. "Nobody," Dalton said. "I kept the purchase quiet." She pressed closer to the window, eyes wide with fear. "They found me," she whispered. Dalton stepped beside her and looked out. 3 men on horseback were riding up the trail. Big men, armed. They didn't look like travelers. They looked like trouble. "You know them?" Dalton asked. Cora's hands trembled as she gripped the window frame. "I was hoping they'd never find this place." Quote, the lead rider was a tall man with a black beard and cold eyes. The other two hovered behind him like shadows. They dismounted hard, boots hitting the ground with the heavy thump of men who expected obedience wherever they went. "Stay behind me," Dalton whispered, not sure why he felt so protective of her already. A loud knock shook the door. "Open up! We know you're in there, Cora." Cora's breath hitched. Dalton opened the door only a few inches, enough to block their view. "This is private property," Dalton said. "You're trespassing." The bearded man smirked and pushed the door wider with one hand, forcing Dalton back a step. "I'm Marcus Webb," he said. "And that woman behind you is my wife." Dalton felt Cora stiffen behind him. "I'm not your wife," she said, her voice tight. That ceremony was forced. Marcus stepped inside fully. His men followed, closing the door behind them. "The law says otherwise," Marcus said. "And the law is what matters out here." Dalton could feel the air change. Cora wasn't just hiding, she was running, and the man she ran from was dangerous. "The lady says she's not going with you," Dalton said. Marcus laughed, a low, cruel sound. "The lady doesn't get a choice." Dalton felt his jaw tighten. Something about the way Marcus looked at Cora made his blood heat. "I bought this cabin legally," Dalton said firmly. "She's my guest." Marcus stepped closer, voice dropping. "You seem like a reasonable man. Walk away. Let me take what's mine." Dalton didn't move. "She stays." Marcus's smile faded. "Then you just made this your problem." What happened next would change everything for all of them. Dalton barely had time to reach for his gun before Marcus raised a hand, signaling his men to spread out inside the cabin. They moved with the confidence of men who had done this before. Dalton stayed in front of Cora, blocking Marcus's path, refusing to let him take another step toward her. Marcus studied Dalton closely, eyes narrowing. "You're willing to die for a woman you met 5 minutes ago?" he asked. Dalton kept his voice steady. "I'm willing to stand between a bully and someone he's hurting." Marcus smirked like he'd heard the same thing from braver men who were now buried somewhere no one would ever find. "This place belongs to me," Dalton said firmly. "I won't let you touch her." Marcus walked slowly around the cabin, dragging his fingers along the wooden table, inspecting the bread, the wildflowers, the clean dishes. He looked back at Dalton with cold triumph. "You really think you own something just because you bought a piece of paper?" he asked. "Land, cabins, people, it's all the same. The strong own it. The weak lose it." Cora flinched at his words. Dalton didn't miss it. "Get out," Dalton said. "All 3 of you." Marcus ignored the command. His eyes locked onto something behind Dalton, something that made his smile widen. Cora had moved slightly into view, her hands pressed against her stomach, her face pale but determined. Dalton felt her fear through the air. Marcus saw it too. "Well now," Marcus said, "you didn't tell him your little secret, did you?" Quote. Cora swallowed hard but didn't speak. Marcus stepped closer, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "That child she's carrying," he said, pointing at Cora with cold amusement. "It isn't mine, but I claimed it anyway. Makes her easier to control." Dalton felt something dark rise inside him. "You don't control people," he said. Marcus shrugged. "Out here I do." The thin man grabbed a burning log from the fireplace and held it up with a cruel grin. "We can smoke them out," he said. "Won't take long." "Put it back," Dalton warned, gun half raised, but Marcus held up a hand. "No need for that," Marcus said. "Not yet. I'm offering you a choice, Mr. Keane." He stepped outside and pointed to the clearing. "You and me, 1 gun each, fair fight. Winner takes everything." Dalton didn't trust him, but facing 3 armed men in a small cabin was certain death. A fair fight, if Marcus kept his word, was better odds than he had right now. "What about your men?" Dalton asked. "They stay back," Marcus said. "They won't interfere unless you cheat." Cora grabbed Dalton's arm. "He has killed before," she whispered. "He's fast, and he enjoys it. You can't beat him." Dalton looked at her small, trembling hands on his sleeve. "I can't let him take you," he said softly. Her eyes filled with fear. Not for herself, but for him. They stepped outside. Cold wind cut through the clearing as birds scattered from the trees. The 2 men squared off at 20 paces, hands hovering near their guns. Marcus grinned confidently. Ready to die, cowboy? Dalton stared him down. Tell me something first, Dalton said. A rancher 6 months ago, Samuel Keane, shot on the North Trail. Did you kill him? Marcus didn't hide it. Your brother? He said. Yeah, he refused to sell what I wanted. I don't like hearing no. Dalton's heart hammered in his chest. Marcus had robbed him of his family, just like he'd robbed Cora of her freedom. Now Dalton had nothing to lose. Marcus counted loud enough for everyone to hear. 1. Dalton's breathing slowed. 2. His eyes locked on the man who had destroyed so many lives. 3. Both guns flashed. The sound cracked through the trees like thunder. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Marcus stumbled, shock spreading across his face. He dropped to his knees, his gun falling from his hand. A dark stain spread across his shirt. Dalton stood tall, smoke rising from his revolver. Marcus fell face first into the dirt and did not move again. But the danger wasn't over. The thin man drew his gun instantly, fury twisting his face. You killed him! You're dead, cowboy! He aimed at Dalton's back. Before he could shoot, another gunshot rang out. The thin man spun, shouting in pain, dropping his weapon. Cora stood at the cabin door holding an old rifle, her stance steady, her eyes fierce. The next shot is for your head, she warned. Marcus's last loyal man ran for his horse and disappeared into the trees. Dalton turned to Cora, stunned by what she had done. She lowered the rifle slowly, her breathing shaky, but her hands didn't drop until the danger had passed. Then the distant sound of more horses echoed through the air. Dalton tensed. More of his men? He asked. Cora shook her head. No worse. As the riders came into view, Dalton saw the badges shining on their chests. It was the sheriff, 6 deputies behind him, guns holstered, but eyes sharp and searching. Dalton's heart sank. He had killed Marcus. Cora had fired a rifle. A gunman had ridden off, likely ready to spread lies. Dalton. Cora whispered, her voice breaking. I think they believe Marcus owned me. The sheriff dismounted, looking at the body on the ground, at the rifle in Cora's hands, at Dalton standing between her and danger. Looks like we walked into something real messy, Sheriff Morrison said. Dalton didn't move. What exactly happened here? Dalton inhaled slowly. Everything was about to change. For him. For Cora. For the child she carried. And this was only the beginning. Sheriff Morrison stepped toward the cabin, his boots crunching over the dirt, his eyes fixed on Marcus's body. The deputies spread out behind him, forming a wide circle like men preparing for trouble. Dalton kept his shoulders straight, even though his heart was pounding. He had shot a powerful man, and now the law was here to decide what came next. Cora stood close behind him, clutching the rifle she had used moments ago. Dalton could feel the fear radiating from her, but there was determination there too. She wasn't backing down anymore. Mr. Keane, Sheriff Morrison said. You want to explain why Marcus Webb is lying dead on your land? Dalton glanced at Cora, then stepped forward. He forced his way into my cabin. He brought 2 armed men with him. He threatened to burn my home down. Then he challenged me to a fair duel. A duel, the sheriff repeated slowly, raising a brow. With witnesses, Dalton said. The wounded gunman, still pinned under a deputy's boot, shouted, He's lying. Marcus was rescuing his wife. Cora stepped forward, voice steady. I'm not his wife. Marcus forced my dying father to sign papers. He told the sheriff I'd been kidnapped to make himself look like a victim. Sheriff Morrison looked between them, trying to piece it all together. And why were you hiding out here, Miss Lane? He asked. Cora took a shaky breath and rested one hand over her stomach. Because I'm with child, she said quietly, and Marcus claimed the baby as his. He wanted to raise it like property. I ran to protect it. For the first time, the sheriff's stern expression softened. And you, Mr. Keane, why were you mixed up in this? Quote. Dalton reached into his vest and pulled out the silver watch he had taken from Marcus's body. The sheriff recognized it instantly. That's Samuel Keane's watch, he said. Your brother. Dalton nodded. Marcus murdered him. He bragged about it. Cora heard everything. Sheriff Morrison's jaw tightened. He took the watch, examined the initials, then let out a long, heavy sigh. "That man's been trouble for years," he said, "always managed to stay one step ahead of justice." The deputies looked uneasy. The wounded gunman went pale. "Sheriff," Dalton said, "there's something else." Inside the watch, Samuel left a map. "It points to evidence he hid before Marcus killed him." The sheriff's eyes sharpened. "Evidence of what?" Dalton unfolded the paper. "Stolen water rights, extortion, families threatened, land taken by force, everything Marcus used to build his power." The sheriff took the map carefully, as if holding something that might change the whole territory. "You're telling me Samuel Keane died collecting this?" he asked. "Marcus killed him for it," Dalton said. The sheriff stepped back and addressed his deputies. "Boys, we're riding out first thing tomorrow. If this map is real, we're about to bring down half the corruption in this county." He turned back to Dalton and Cora. "For now, you two are coming with me to town, not as prisoners, as witnesses." The tension finally broke from Cora's shoulders. She swayed a little, and Dalton steadied her gently. "Sheriff," she said, her voice soft with relief, "thank you." "We're not done yet," Morrison replied. "But I'll make sure the truth gets heard." 3 days later, everything had changed. Sheriff Morrison's team found Samuel's hidden cave in the mountains. Inside were journals, signed statements, stolen deeds, and lists of Marcus's crimes. The evidence was undeniable. Several powerful men were arrested, and Marcus's estate was seized by the court. Cora's marriage was declared invalid. The debt her father owed was wiped clean, and the court awarded her enough money to start a new life. The wounded gunman confessed everything to save himself from a long sentence. His testimony matched Cora's and Dalton's. It cleared Dalton of any wrongdoing in the duel. The land, the cabin, and Dalton's freedom were safe. But something else had changed too. Dalton and Cora were no longer strangers thrown together by danger. They had become something like a small family, even if they never spoke it aloud. 6 months later, Dalton stood on the porch of his rebuilt cabin. The summer breeze carried the smell of pine needles through the air. The land looked alive again, full of green grass and bright sunlight. He had worked every day, fixing the roof, repairing the barn, mending the fences. Behind him, laughter floated through the open window. Cora was inside, folding laundry at the table, her pregnancy showing clearly now. She moved with the gentle grace of a woman preparing for the greatest change in her life. Dalton walked into the cabin, unable to stop smiling as he watched her. She looked up and brushed a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "The baby kicked again this morning," she said. "First time I felt it that strong." Dalton's chest warmed. "That's a good sign," he said. "Means he's growing strong." She smiled. "You think it's a boy?" Dalton leaned against the doorway and folded his arms. "If it is," he said, "you should name him what you wanted." Cora rested her hands on her stomach. "Samuel," she said softly, "for your brother. A man who saved us both, even after he was gone." Dalton swallowed the lump in his throat. Samuel would have liked that. Cora stepped closer. "You saved us too, Dalton," she said. "You gave us a home. You gave us safety." He shook his head humbly. "You saved me first." She took his hand, placing it gently over her stomach. Dalton felt the faintest movement beneath his palm, a small, powerful kick. Cora's eyes filled with tears. "This child," she whispered, "is finally safe." Dalton brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "And you are too," he said. "Both of you." Cora rested her head against his chest. Dalton wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as the warm light of evening filled the cabin. For the first time in a long time, Dalton felt something he thought he had lost forever. A future, a family, and a home worth fighting for.